one end, in LeBron, there's a dude with 35 in white, getting it done defensively and then offensively, taking over the fight. Mama, there goes that man.
They have shared a brilliant championship battle, but the championship can only be won by one, and it's going Dutch in 2021. Max Verstappen, for the first time ever, is champion of the world.
Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Waterboy Experience. I am your host, the Waterboy himself, Adam Scheifter. No, this is Davis McLemore, and this is the tired edition of the Waterboy Experience. Vince retired, Vettel retired, Leclerc is just tired of Ferrari, and me, I'm just plain tired. But here to join me is the peg-riding, drug-hiding, the sleepy Red Bull-chugging son of a gun, Jason Shaddix. Jason, how are you, my man?
Do you hear this?
What are those?
These are Vicodins that Ferrari was giving away to the engineers and the mechanics so they didn't kill the strategists this past weekend. Unfortunately, Charles Leclerc took the entire box and I only managed to get one bottle.
Can I have some?
Hell no, you didn't go through what I went through this weekend.
Yeah, that's true. Well, we'll get into all that drama about Charles Leclerc and Ferrari and Carlos Sainz and whoever else is involved in all that. I thought we were going to, honestly, like, just really quick, I thought we were going to see, you remember when Michael Schumacher walked towards the, what was the name of it? What was he going towards?
Oh, was it the one where he was pissed after there was an incident and the guy didn't see him crash into Michael?
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't happen anymore. They don't have the balls of Michael Schumacher.
I don't know, but, and Charles is taking it pretty hard, too.
Speaking of taking it pretty hard, how's your asshole this week?
It's pretty rough. I got it patched up in I'm going to need some of those Viticins, but,
What you need is some lube. That's what you need, boy.
well, I learned that lesson. So, I think we're going to start off the top of the show right here. We're just going to talk really quick. We've been meaning to mention it, but, you know, everywhere else has covered it to death, so we're not going to go into super big depth. So, we're going to talk about Vince McMahon retiring and Triple H being the new head of creative and his daughter, Stephanie McMahon, and Nick Khan being the new co-CEOs. What do you think?
That is so last week news.
It is last week news, but we weren't able to record last week, so we got to put it in here.
Yeah, it's interesting because this completely changes the dynamic of WWE. No longer are they under the whims of Vince McMahon, who has ruled that company with an iron fist. And in the minds of many fans, as just dragged it down, and no longer is it the company that everybody knew in the late 90s, early 2000s, where it was big and everybody was watching it. Now it's just a shell of its former self, and like you said, everybody's covered it. We're not going to beat it to death. We've already beaten this horse as much as it can be beaten, but it's going to be interesting seeing Paul Levesque, Triple H, be in control of creative, because he did a wonderful job during the NXT days, during the black and gold era. So it's going to be very interesting to see how well put together this show is. And already news is coming out that a lot of the wrestlers are no longer going to be so tied up to scripts, and they're going to be able to cut promos, from their mind, and they don't have to, script together their matches, which if you're not a fan of professional wrestling, that's not a thing you actually did. For like almost 100 years, they never choreographed their match until like the late 90s, and then like the early 2000s all the way till now. They've just been increasing it and making all the match be choreographed to hell. No, back then it was like, okay, we're in a match, boom, boom, we're hitting each other, and I tell the guy, hey, we're gonna do this. Okay, let's do it.
You called it in the ring.
Exactly, and now, that's no longer being the case in WWE. Obviously there's some people who are gonna still get scripts because they can't talk by themselves. And there's some wrestlers, especially like the green ones who don't really know much, they're going to be the ones that are going to be still more choreographed their matches just because they're still learning the ropes. But overall, it looks like WWE is going in the right position. I don't know if it'll be a long-term thing and it'll last, but hopefully it will, and maybe it will be a better product because of it.
I hope it can be. And I mean, even as soon as this past week's Monday Night Raw, we saw a lot more wrestling than we usually do. And they didn't pipe in the crowd noise nearly as much, But just to list off a few matches they had AJ Styles versus Mustafa Ali versus The Miz. They had Seth Rollins versus Montez Ford. They had Alexa Bliss versus Asuka, or Oscar, whatever you want to call her. Dolph Ziggler versus Ciampa versus Chad Gable. And they had The Miz versus AJ Styles with Ciampa, and, or Ciampa with The Miz versus AJ Styles. And I mean, this card just had a lot more matches on it than, and the matches were longer than WWE shows have typically been. Usually, they've timed it out. It's about 20, 25 minutes of actual wrestling in a 3-hour show. We're already starting to see some changes in the production of the show. Like I said, they don't pipe in the crowd noise anymore. And, it honestly seems like they're treating the U.S. title as more of a TV title, because next week is going to be Ciampa versus Bobby Lashley for the U.S. title. So it is interesting to see, and, we're hopeful that, we can get back to where we can actually watch Monday Night Raw again.
Well, I don't know about that. It's still a 3-hour show. I don't care how good it is.
It's ridiculously long.
Yeah, it's ridiculously long. Even SmackDown and NXT, which are 2 hours, I'm like, I'm not really going to watch all of this. I like wrestling, but I don't like it enough to sit through that, because I still know what it's like.
Well, we're just gonna sit here and be optimistic about it. Maybe we start talking more about wrestling. But we're going to move on from here, and we're going to talk about Deshaun Watson.
I am really pissed about this. I'll be honest. I fucking hate the decision, which was announced by the NFL. What do you call it? The
NFLPA?
Exactly. And what
you have the quote. You have the quote on your phone. If you want to go ahead and read the quote from the NFLPA, and then I'll actually read an article from CNN.
All right. So this is a quote that I got from ESPN article, and it says, quote, "The ruling relied on 32 previous suspensions under the league's personal conduct policy. In 21 of those instances, the league suspended the player for 6 games, including the cases of Darius Guice and Johnny Manziel. Greg Hardy was suspended for 4 games. The longest suspension, 10 games for Jerome Jones in 2021, involved a criminal plea and multiple incidents of domestic violence. The 2 8-game suspension of Kareem Hunt in 2019 and Mark Walton in 2020 also took into account multiple incidents of domestic violence. In Robinson's ruling, she noted that one of the aggravating factors in determining Watson's discipline was his, quote, lack of express remorse, end quote. She noted that among the mitigating factors that were him being a first-time offender and his, quote, excellent reputation in his community prior to these events, end quote. Now, let me ask you this. What the fuck do you think about this horse shit right about now?
I don't know. I'm rubbing my face. It's just, the more I hear about, we did this for this guy, but, Kareem Hunt had 3 allegations against him, and they were violent. And Kareem Hunt was suspended 8 games for those 3. And coincidentally enough, he's on the Browns. Deshaun Watson had over 20.
24 personal lawsuits, which 23 of those have been settled. And then there's around 30 lawsuits that the Texans have settled on their own involving Deshaun Watson and sexual assault allegations.
Right. But there's so many cases, whether they're violent or not. There's just so many that you can't compare them to past cases. Johnny Manziel got drunk. That was what happened there. And I don't know how many games they suspended him for, but, he's out of the league indefinitely.
6 games, I think.
6 games. Coincidentally, he was on the Browns. So, I don't know. Maybe Browns is just domestic abuse or domestic violence central. But, no, it really pisses me off that they looked at other cases as if this was just like any other case where they had 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 allegations when Deshaun Watson had over 20, 24.
And here's the thing, for me personally, I think if there's even one case of domestic abuse or sexual assault that is valid, that's the main point, that has some validity to it, and it's not just somebody saying it just for the clicks, the likes, and all that, because that does happen sometimes. But
they were saying that was first happening, when the first few cases came out, people were like, oh, that's just what's going on, and then more, and then more, and then more, and then we started going like, you know what, maybe the Deshaun Watson guy isn't a really good guy.
Exactly. More started coming out, more and more and more, until, there's suspected that there's a total of 80, maybe a little bit more cases of sexual assault. And here's the thing that kind of pissed me off about this judge was the fact that she said, well, he's a first-time offender. First time what? There's 24 women who were suing him for that. Just because he settled 23 of those cases does not mean he's innocent, nor that he's a first-time offender. I think that's one of the most bullshit things you could say. It's fucking stupid.
It is ridiculous, and you can't call him a first-time offender when there's a history of him doing this since college. Hell, I think there's even records of him doing this since high school.
That makes it even worse. And here's my thing, though. I don't care if that's the first time you ever done something like sexual assaulting somebody, and it wasn't like actual rape, but what he did, put his dick out and made them touch it, or spewed on their face, whatever, or even rape or any of that stuff. I don't care if it's a first offense.
But that's considered non-violent.
Yeah, that's what the judge said. It's because it's a non-violent act. But for me personally, I don't care about that. You're a grown-ass adult who knows the difference between good and bad, and you know that's not good. If a girl doesn't want to fuck you, it's a fucking no. It's a no, I'm not going to fuck you, fuck off. That's what it is, okay? And you're old enough to know that, all right? He is old enough to know that. He's not some 2-year-old who doesn't know the difference between his asshole and a hole in the ground. So for me, I don't think he should be suspended at all. I think he should be fired. Okay, anybody who has any case of sexual assault or domestic abuse brought up against them, and there's evidence that, yes, this did happen, whether it's, there's like 80 people saying that he did do it, or it's like there's one person, but there's audio, there's video, or there's witnesses who've seen that and said, yeah, he did hit her, or yeah, he did sexually assault her. You should be kicked out of the league. You shouldn't be suspended. You should be kicked out because you should know better than this. You should know not to be a fucking moron.
And ultimately, this comes back onto your team and the organization that you work for. But I want you to read that last quote, that last little piece about community or whatever it is.
Yeah, it says that she said, quote, excellent reputation in his community prior to these events, end quote.
Excellent reputation in his community prior to these events. Can I mention a name here?
Go for it.
Jimmy Savile.
Oh, I know where this is going.
You want to talk about somebody that had an quote-unquote excellent reputation in his community?
Wait. Before you go on, you want to explain to the people Jimmy Savile is?
Jimmy Savile, if you haven't seen the Netflix documentary series, what's it called? Jimmy Savile, British Nightmare? Something like that?
I believe so.
Yeah, it's on Netflix. Check it out. It's really good. But he essentially was this very charitable, very flamboyant. He was a philanthropist?
Not exactly that. He was considered just a good Samaritan.
Right. He had a show where he would have kids on the show and they would write him and say, the one thing that I've always wanted to do, I want to go skydiving. I want to do this.
Jim Will Fix It is the name of the show.
Jim Will Fix It, yeah. And years later, come to find out, he's a child predator. He's a child molester. He's all this different kind of bad stuff. And now there are a lot of people who refuse to acknowledge it because they think about, back in the day, Jimmy Savile was this guy that we looked at like he was the second coming of Christ. He was the nicest guy ever.
Not to completely refute your point, but when the first allegations started to come out after he was dead, a lot of people were saying, no, this is not true. There's no way this man could have been like that. That's when people were saying, no, it's not true. But once the allegations started coming out, once the witnesses started coming out, women who, when they were sexually violated, were young ladies, if not little girls, that, yeah, Jimmy Savile raped me, or he sexually assaulted me. And now the perception in Britain is, yeah, this guy was a monster, and he was so powerful, he was so well connected. The British government, the prime ministers, the king, not the queen, whatever the royal family.
Queen, yeah.
Yeah, not the queen, but like people in the royal family would come to him for advice on what to do. He was a disc jockey who turned into a TV presenter, who did charity work and all that. That's pretty much the extent of his career. And he was really successful at it, and everybody was watching him. But, he was doing all this stuff, but he gained so much power that, and this is really sad. And, in the documentary on Netflix, they talk about how he was friends with this person who was in charge of this orphanage for girls, essentially a girl orphanage. And he would donate a lot of money, do a lot of work to recoup money, charity work and all that for the orphanage, for the girls, or I think it was a private school or something like that. And, apparently he would go to the guy and say, yeah, I want this girl, and this girl to come with me. And from there, he would rape them or sexually assault them, everything. He would do it at hospitals where this woman couldn't even move and all that. And he was pleasuring her without her consent. And everybody just turned a blind eye because he's like, oh, that's just Jimmy. He's just weird. He's just eccentric. That was the case with Jimmy Savile.
Well, and I mean, I know it's very bold to compare Deshaun Watson to Jimmy Savile because Jimmy was, he was a monster. But they are making this ruling based on his previous upstanding citizenship or whatever. So they're completely ignoring, oh, he did this to me, he did that to me, all these allegations. Well, he's a good guy. He does this. He feeds the poor and the sick, he kisses babies, he does all that.
I mean, if you never believe a politician when he says that, why would you believe anybody else?
Exactly. Why would you believe an NFL player? But I'm going to read an article that says a lot of quotes in here that I agree with. It's from CNN. It was written by Ben Moore on August 3rd. Is today August 3rd?
Yes.
Yes, it is. It was written this morning by Ben Morse as we're recording. He says, quote, the attorney of Deshaun Watson's accusers say the NFL does not care about the rights of women following the Cleveland Browns quarterback suspension for sexual misconduct allegations. Appearing on ESPN's First Take, attorney Tony Busby attacked the investigation, saying he hopes the NFL will appeal the case, but his clients are angered and disappointed by the lenient suspension handed down by a disciplinary officer. Quote, don't expect the NFL to do anything heroic here, Busby said. Watson was suspended on Monday for 6 games without pay for violating the NFL's personal conduct policy in private meetings with massage therapists, according to rulings by a retired federal judge jointly appointed by the NFL and the NFL Players Association. Watson has repeatedly denied the acute accusations, saying, I never assaulted, I never disrespected, and I never harassed any women in my life. I don't have any regrets. 2 grand juries in Texas have declined to charge Watson with any crimes, even though 24 civil lawsuits have been filed against Watson. Now, 23 of them have been settled confidentially. But what do you think so far?
Load of bullshit is everything that, the Deshaun Watson, everything about this case, I said my point.
That's that last quote that I'm looking at that kind of makes my stomach turn a little bit. He says, I don't have any regrets.
Yeah, I don't have any regrets. I don't regret eating that entire pizza the other night, yet, I still did it.
Yes, you did. But he says, I never assaulted and I never disrespected and I never harassed any women in my life. I think it comes down to what his definition of all these 3 words are. And I think he has a very loose definition of it. I think he thinks of it as, happy endings, like they said earlier in the trial. Like his lawyer said, well, happy endings happen all the time in these situations. No, but it's that I don't have any regrets that makes me I really fucking hate this guy. And I hope when he comes back, the game he comes back, I hope he gets booed out of the building.
If they're playing in Cleveland, they're not going to boo him. They're going to cheer him on, say, oh, he's back, he's so great.
And left and right, the Cleveland Browns fans are defending him, and they'll be like, well, they were settled. Well, all these cases, they're settled. There's really only one that wasn't settled yet, and it's going to be settled and all that stuff. But I've said it a number of times, and there was a dude I argued with on Instagram for a while. I said, well, settling does not necessarily mean innocent.
A great example is whenever there's a problem with, say, a type of medicine or a product that, ends up harming somebody. And, you heard these giant class action lawsuits against pharmaceutical companies, against, product companies and all that. Before, they get to that point, they try to settle with the people that's suing them. And that's why, a lot of those cases sometimes aren't found out right away because they settle with the person because they're like, yeah, we knew about it. We're going to pay you $10 million to shut you up because they don't want to pay the billions of dollars they would have to otherwise. Settling does not mean you're innocent.
the sooner you can just get them settled and out of the way, then the better, because that's quicker that you don't have to deal with.
I guess it depends on who's looking at it, because for me personally, if I see like something like this, they settled out of court and there's a lot of damning evidence that says that person is guilty, that says to me, yeah, this isn't like a case where, oh, you know, she's just trying to get money out of me and I'm just gonna give her the money so she doesn't make me any problems. No, this is the case of like, I don't want my reputation to go down any further. I'm gonna pay you to shut up. Okay, that's essentially what it is. That's the way I look at it. And that's the way a lot of people with any type of morale and knowledge will look at it and say, yeah, that's what's going on.
So I'm looking at the schedule to see how many games he'd be out and what would the game be when he comes back. So it looks like he's going to miss the game against the Browns. He plays for the Browns. Going to miss the game for the Panthers, Jets, Steelers, Falcons, Chargers, Patriots. It looks like the week he'll be back, he's going to be playing against the Ravens, and then he's got the Bengals. Those are two tough tests right off the spot. And I hope, especially that week that he plays the Bengals, I hope Joe Burrow walks all over him, you know what I mean?
I hope somebody breaks his neck.
It is what it is, and, you know, we'll see what happens. Because as of right now, it looks like the NFL is not going to do anything. They're not going to appeal. They're just going to take it because he's a good guy. You know, he really is a good guy.
Yeah, it's his first time offense. You know, we should make a big deal out of it.
Well, now I want to perk ourselves up a little bit. I want to talk about the Hall of Fame game that is coming up this Thursday, I believe. Is that right?
I do believe so.
It is going to be the Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Las Vegas Raiders. My Las Vegas Raiders. And I can't tell you how excited I am for this game, because this is the first football game back since last season, and it just happens to be my boys. It's going to be held in Canton, Ohio to kick off the preseason, and I mean, there's not much going on with it. It's just going to be a little bit of a fun game to watch. I want to see how many of our starters we're going to play. I want to see how many of their starters. Are they going to play Trevor Lawrence this week? We don't know. But typically, teams like to play their starters in the first week or first 2 weeks of the preseason games, and then they'll start playing their backups as they get deeper into the preseason, and then that's how that works. So we might see the first Derek Carr and Devontae Adams hook up. We'll see. But I'm really excited about it. I'm really excited about this season as a Raider fan.
It's just going to be another exhibition match. Let's going to be honest.
It is, yeah. But it's fun to preview what we could possibly be seeing for this year.
In other words, because we're in an F1 summer break, Davis finally gets to do something, and I don't have to review a race.
Yeah, now I get to write the scripts. But you want to take it back down? And do you want to talk about the Miami Dolphins owner?
Yes, because I'm a little bit confused about it. I saw the headline news on ESPN, but I didn't know exactly what it was about, because it was talking about Brady and I can't remember who else. And it had to do with the Miami Dolphins owner, who, quite frankly enough, the Miami Grand Prix is held in the Dolphin Stadium. So
Stephen Ross, yeah.
Exactly. So please explain to me and the fans, listeners, what this is all about.
Well, this is coming from an ESPN article written by Marcel Louis-Jacques. It says, quote, "The NFL notified the Miami Dolphins on Tuesday that the team would be stripped of its 2023 first-round pick, among other disciplinary measures, for violations of the league policies relating to the integrity of the game. Following a 6-month investigation, the league found the Dolphins, primarily team owner Stephen Ross and vice chairman / limited partner Bruce Beal, violated the anti-tampering policy on 3 occasions from 2019 to 2022 in conversations with quarterback Tom Brady and the agent for then New Orleans Saints coach Sean Payton. The NFL, however, found no evidence that the team intentionally lost games during the 2019 season. In February, former Dolphins coach Brian Flores said his lawsuit alleging racism in the league's hiring practices, that Ross attempted to incentivize him to tank or purposefully lose games shortly after he was hired in 2019, with Ross allegedly offering Flores $100,000 for every loss that season. Flores alleged that as a team won games late in the season, Dolphins general manager Chris Greer told him Ross was mad the on-field success was compromising the team's draft position. In addition to the first-round pick, the Dolphins will also forfeit their 2024 third-round selection. Ross, meanwhile, was fined $1.5 million and suspended through October 17th, during which time he isn't permitted to be at the Dolphins facility or represent the team at any event. He also can't attend any league meeting before the annual meeting in 2023. What do you think about that?
I mean, every team does it, doesn't it?
He was suspended just as long as Deshaun Watson.
That's the funny part. But
Deshaun Watson's suspension ends October 16th, I think, and his ends the 17th.
Hey, they'll be getting massages together. Happy endings.
Hey, there you go. But I'm confused exactly what they did to tamper. I'm still looking on here. So, Brady will not incur any punishment for the Dolphins tampering, NFL League spokesperson Brian McCarthy told ESPN's Jenna Lane. Beal spearheaded impermissible communications with Brady, then the New England Patriots quarterback, while he was still under contract. Ross and other Dolphins executives were informed of the content of those conversations. They tampered again with Brady once again following the 2021 season when he was under contract with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This time, however, the conversation centered on Brady joining the team as a limited partner and possibly a football executive, although the possibility of him playing for the team was discussed, according to the league's investigation. So that's what this was all about, was basically they were trying to get Tom Brady to come over to the Miami Dolphins when he was still under contract with New England. That's considered tampering.
But isn't that how you talk to somebody who's got a contract going on and you want to buy him out or you want to hire him for the next season? I mean,
you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah, you're also not supposed to sexually assault women, but that didn't stop Deshaun Watson.
Here we go again, huh? You're also not supposed to deflate footballs, but,
Look, he got punished for it. Let it go already.
We'll let it go. It was a long time ago, and he's since then proved that he is the greatest quarterback of all time, and yada, 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 yada. I just have respect for him because he, thankfully for me, he did it for me. He beat Patrick Mahomes.
Ah, good old Patty. Anyway, I don't see anything wrong with it. I just think, Tom Brady was never going to go to the Miami Dolphins. Not in a million years.
It's just like, hey, maybe you can come over and play with us. Maybe you could do this. And he's just like, yeah, sure, whatever. I don't care. And he's just like, brushing them off like, yeah, whatever.
I'll think about it.
The funny thing is, he didn't even go to the Miami Dolphins. He went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers right down the road.
And then won a Super Bowl with them.
That's the funniest part. And won a Super Bowl with them. So they're sitting there, they tampered, they got in trouble with it, and they still didn't get him. So
it'd be funny if the owner was just thinking the entire time, if Brady would have signed with us, we would have gone to the Super Bowl and we would have won.
Instead, they've got, quote unquote, according to Tyreek Hill, the most accurate quarterback in the NFL in Tua Tagovailoa. Okay, here's another thing. Him saying that kind of validated everybody's thoughts, and it validated my thoughts. Patrick Mahomes is not as good of a quarterback as people say he is. Sure, he's athletic. He can do all the stuff. He can do a backflip heel spin while throwing the football down the field. But it was interesting hearing Tyreek Hill, they asked him, why do you like playing for Miami? Why did you pick Miami? He said, I wanted to play for the most accurate quarterback in the NFL. And that, to me, felt like a shot at Patrick Mahomes because you can watch every play. I've sent you clips of him. Literally, Patrick goes, Tyreek's down there somewhere, and he just chunks it, and Tyreek has to look for it and find it.
I'll avoid getting hit.
While avoiding getting hit. But now I don't feel like he has a wide receiver that's fast enough to be able to do that. I mean, sure, Travis Kelce can do that, but Travis Kelce is Travis Kelce. So, yeah.
We also got one more news before we get into Formula One about Lewis Hamilton buying into the Denver Broncos.
More the reason for me to hate this man.
He's just putting in some money into it, so growing his portfolio.
Yeah. But anybody that invests in the ponies, no friend of mine.
Is that why you don't go to Walmart? Because they're trying to buy out the team.
That's why I would rather shop at Corner Market now
and pay twice.
I'd rather pay double than give my money to somebody who owns the Denver Broncos.
Could be worse. You could be giving your money to somebody who owns the Las Vegas Raiders.
I would donate every penny to them if I could.
Anyway, let's move on to Formula One. All right, you ready?
Really quick before we move on to Formula One, I want to mention that NBA legend Bill Russell passed away the other day, and we want to send our thoughts to his family. And he was one of the all-time greats, and nobody in the NBA can play like he used to. It was a much different game, but yeah, rest in peace, Bill Russell. He's one of the greats of all time.
11 titles.
11. So, Jordan got 6. I'm just saying.
Anyway, with Formula One, we're going to go there. We don't have any nondescript motorsport news, mostly because I didn't want to cover the 24 hours of Spa. We already did we do Le Mans?
Did do Le Mans. 24 hours of Le Mans?
Yeah, we did the 24 hours of Le Mans. I'm not keen on keeping up with 24 hours anymore. I'll see you next year at Le Mans. Anyway, the biggest news to hit this weekend, and not just Formula One, but the world of motorsport, is that 4-time world champion Sebastian Vettel will be retiring at the end of this season. He's held quite the extraordinary career, becoming the first world champion as well as the youngest for the then new Formula One team, Red Bull Racing. He was seen as a villain for many in the early 2010s, but his time as Ferrari's golden boy changed the public's opinion. Unfortunately, his time at the Scuderia was not as fruitful as his days with Red Bull. Bad calls by the team and the litany of errors caused by himself let the championship window open for Lewis Hamilton and a Mercedes to take and to dominate the rest of the decade. Following the arrival of Ferrari's newest protege, Charles Leclerc, Vettel's days with the prancing horse were numbered. Knowing this, halfway through the 2020 season, he announced that he would be leaving Ferrari and heading for the new team of Aston Martin in 2021. And while they weren't a world championship winning team that year, Sebastian did garner a load of points, a podium in Baku and almost another one in Hungary, until he was disqualified for not having enough fuel in the car at the end of the race. From there, he would continue to put on decent results, and he hoped that with the new era of Formula One fast approaching, that they would be able to challenge the frontrunners and maybe even win a few races this year. Unfortunately, this was not the case, and Aston Martin continued to struggle, at some points even being the worst team on the grid. It seems that finally, Sebastian has had enough, and on July 28th, ahead of the Hungarian Grand Prix, he announced his retirement, citing the need for spending more time with his children. He has been an inspiration for many, a hatred for others, and recently an advocate for climate change. His contribution in Formula One has put him alongside some of the greatest drivers who have ever been behind the wheel of a car, and his presence on the grid will be missed by everybody in the paddock as well as everybody at home. And that was Sebastian Vettel's retirement. But there was also something else. Moving forward past the GP, it was announced that Aston Martin had signed 2-time world champion Fernando Alonso, and he would be the one to replace Vettel. This came as a shock because Alonso has been doing quite well in Alpine and had even been discussing an extension deal that went well after his retirement from Formula One, which would allow him to get a drive with Alpine's team at Le Mans. This news was shocking to Alpine, who didn't even know of this move until Aston Martin announced it during the press release. Rumors going around the paddock was that Alpine didn't want to sign Alonso for a multi-year contract, but instead a year-by-year contract. This didn't sit well with Alonso, especially because the reason Alpine was doing this year-by-year contract was because they wanted their new protege, Oscar Piastri, to have a seat with them or with another team as a lone driver, like a driver they loaned. The team most interested, according to the rumor, was McLaren, but following Alonso's departure, Alpine announced that Oscar Piastri was going to be his replacement. But, and it doesn't end there, like it was the case with IndyCar champion Alex Palou and Ganassi Racing, Oscar Piastri announced through a tweet, quote, "I understand that without my agreement, Alpine F1 have put on a press release late this afternoon that I am driving for them next year. This is wrong, and I have not signed a contract with Alpine for 2023. I will not be driving for Alpine next year," end quote. According to an article by ESPN, they said that multiple sources have informed them that Piastri had signed a pre-contract with McLaren, which again was like Alex Palou, and just like what is going on with the IndyCar champion, Alpine says that Piastri does have to race with them next year because of his contract.
That was a mouthful.
I'm not even done. Just give me a little bit more. A little bit more. With all of this, the future of Daniel Ricciardo with McLaren is once again put into question. What do you think?
I feel like Daniel Ricciardo is done. We've been saying that pretty much all season. He can't keep up with Lando Norris, and he's consistently in the back of the pack. Regarding the whole situation that happened, what is it with teams prematurely announcing that, oh yeah, he's going to come back, and they'll be like, no, I'm not.
what is it with teams prematurely announcing, they're going to be racing, somebody's going to be racing with them, and then saying, no, we're not going to do that. And then McLaren says, but we got him.
No, yeah. He's like, no, he's actually not going to go there. He's going to come here. So
even with Alex, there's still some questions whether or not he'll actually be able to legally be able to go to McLaren, because Ganassi Racing is saying, no, your contract says that we can keep you here, even though they're trying to enact a clause that says that, but it isn't really stated in his contract that he has to race till 2023. Plus, I mean, if McLaren really wanted him, they could just buy him out.
Are racers considered independent contractors or no?
Well, they're considered part of the team, and I mean, they live in Europe, so they don't have to deal with, health insurance and all that. There's no union, there's none of that. The thing about driver contracts with teams in Formula One, at least, is they don't mean shit. If you're not performing up to standards, you can get kicked out halfway through the year, and we've seen that most recently with Red Bull, which have kicked out Daniel Kvyat from Red Bull Racing and replaced him with Max Verstappen. And then Pierre Gasly was replaced halfway through the season with Alex Albon. And then Alex, after the end of the season, 2020, he was replaced by Checo Perez. So, they don't really mean anything, those contracts. Well, I don't know about the IndyCar ones, but in Formula One, it is very interesting. And what I found interesting was...
It's at the discretion of the team.
Yes, and what I found very interesting was, obviously, Sebastian retiring, sad thing. He's been a great driver. He hasn't been able to muster a 5th world championship win. He was close with Ferrari, didn't get it quite there. We're going to talk about Ferrari in a second. But he wanted Mick to take his place in Aston Martin, which, it's still questionable whether Mick would want to do that. I understand that's his mentor, but at the same time, Haas is a better team. But yeah, other than that, and then Oscar Piastri, who was like Alpine's golden boy. That's the big thing. The golden boy who was going to replace Fernando Alonso, and they wanted him to give him a seat in Formula One some way or the other. That's why he was talking to McLaren. Interesting thing is, Oscar Piastri is the Formula 3 and Formula 2 world champion. So he's got a lot of potential. But yeah, that's what's going on right now.
Well, tell us about what's going on with Ferrari, because, for a brief second I thought, well, hell, maybe Mick will go to Ferrari. But now I'm like, well, there's a lot of drama going on in that organization right now, So what's happening? What's going on?
So to do that, let me give you a recap of the last 2 races. I'm not going to go into detail like I've gone in the past, mostly because kind of running low on time. But what happened in the French Grand Prix was, and this is still up to debate, whether it was a team fault or whether it was a driver error. And it's looking more like a driver error. At least Charles Leclerc is taking blame for it. During one of the corners, a notorious corner at the French Grand Prix, Leclerc just spun out and he just went off the track. And there's a runoff area where it slows you down. You'll see these colored gravel, which is like red and blue, and it kind of looks like the French flag. Well, they're actually designed in a way where they slow you down before you hit the barricade. And he did hit the barricade, but it was more like a slow tap. But it was still hard enough where the front tires got under the barricade, so he was stuck, and he tried to reverse, and he was saying the pedal is stuck or something like that.
It was more like a boom, but yeah.
Yeah, and that's when he screamed out, no! And, any Ferrari fan, we've heard that scream multiple times. We heard it with Sebastian Vettel in 2018, and that was actually the last time he was very competitive against Mercedes, and he crashed out at the German Grand Prix, which is his home race, and he was like, for fuck's sake. And then Charles the next year did the same thing, and then, this year he crashed out, and that's not the first time, but, they're still like, okay, if Charles can win every race from now on, and Max crashes out a few times, or ends up a few places behind, like in 3rd place, he's still got a shot. And Ferrari was saying, we're going to go win the Hungarian Grand Prix. And Red Bull, when they asked them, they're like, well, we're not 100% sure. Before these new regulations, this was a Red Bull track. Now we're not so sure. So they go to the Hungarian Grand Prix. During qualifying, Max had a bit of an issue with his MGUK, so he ended up finishing P10. George Russell got P1, so he got pole position, and then he was followed by Sainz and Leclerc in 2nd and 3rd. And then Checo was a P11 because there was a mix-up with track limits, and they were like, oh, we deleted your track, you went over the track limit, and then it's like the broadcaster were like, well, look, we could tell, obviously, that he didn't, and then reinstated, but he was like, what the fuck, I don't have any more time to get a very competitive lap. So that happened, and they were at the middle of the pack, like right in the middle. And the race starts, and George tries to defend against the Ferraris. Even though Mercedes has done so much greatness to get that car to be up where it is now, it's still nowhere near close to the pace of the Ferraris and the Red Bulls. So the Red Bulls and the Ferraris just kept going. Max started to climb the ladder, and the Ferraris were doing really well. Sainz was leaving in the race, and then Sainz was pitted for the, getting different tires. Leclerc stayed out even longer because he wanted to essentially overtake Sainz when he comes out of the pit lane, which he did that, and he was on the mediums. And then about 10 laps later, Max Verstappen, who was closing in on the leaders, I think he was like in third or fourth, he pitted for another set of tires. And Ferrari said, okay, Charles, pit. We're going to pit you. Again, his medium tires were only 10 laps old, and they put him on the hard tires. Now, at this point, we had seen Alpine, McLaren, and Haas go on the hard tires. And because of the colder temperatures at the Hungarian ring, the tires were not doing anything at all. They were slow. They were the slowest tires out there. Nobody else was on those tires. The only reason those teams were on those tires was because they only had one set of mediums because they ran through them during practice and qualifying. So that happened, and Leclerc was still leading the race, and then Verstappen caught up to him, and Verstappen passed him. And then what happened was around lap 50-something, I believe, or maybe 60, Max had just passed them, and they're in the last corner before going into the straights and to start the new lap. And Max accidentally hits a wet patch of track, which was wet because it was starting to sprinkle and all that. So he spins out, does a 360-degree spin, keeps the car, heads on going. Charles Leclerc takes the victory, but because he's on the hard tires, he cannot keep up. Max literally just goes and passes him by. And Ferrari was like, okay, we got to pitch you again. And they put him on the softs, which he was fast, finally. But at that point, the other teams have gotten so far ahead that he ended up being fourth and fifth, I believe.
It was too late by that point.
Yeah, it was too late. And I can't remember how, but they somehow messed up Carlos' race. And it ended up being that, Max won. Lewis Hamilton got P2. George Russell got P3, which is exactly what happened at the French Grand Prix, like that exact ending. And during the cool down room, which is like where they cool down before they go out to the podiums, they were actually laughing about the fact that the Ferraris were on the hard tires because everybody knew those tires weren't worth a lick of shit. And now everybody...
It's embarrassing.
It's so embarrassing. And a lot of people, like the internet is saying, what the fuck? Literally, Ferrari at this point just gave away their chance at fighting at the World Championship because they don't believe Ferrari no longer has a chance at beating Red Bull for the World Championship. In fact, they don't even think that they have a chance at beating Mercedes for the Constructors' Championship, and they're going to end up being P3.
So Ferrari's given up, and Leclerc and Sainz are not.
They might be giving up internally.
I mean, Leclerc probably is by now because you see all the things he's been posting and all the things that he's been saying. It's like a 13-year-old boy after he just went through his first middle school breakup.
And the thing is, Charles does everything Ferrari tells him to do. That's why he's their golden boy. The thing is, and if you notice this, Carlos is more willing to say, no, fuck you. I'm not going to do that because he did that at the French Grand Prix because he was racing against Checo for P3. At this point, he had a 5-second penalty. But if you got it farther enough in P3, that let's say there's a 6-second gap between P3 and P4, you could take the 5-second penalty after the race, still end up in P3. That didn't happen because when he was racing against Checo, even after the delay and all that, with the radio, he was saying, we need you to box. And he's like, no, are you insane? And he did end up boxing at the end of the other lap. And he ended up finishing, I think, 5th, I believe. But it's just so crazy how Ferrari is just tripping on themselves because we thought the biggest detrimental to Ferrari would be that engine, which has been notoriously unreliable. And now that's not the case. It's the team itself, the strategists, who have been fucking up so bad.
The car itself still has problems, but the management of the team, the strategist of the races are the biggest problem because it's like they have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah, and, throughout the season, people were trying to defend them, saying, well, it's easy to say that, they should have done this and all this with hindsight, which in some cases, yes, but in other cases, it's obviously Ferrari not knowing what they're doing, and there's a long history of Ferrari doing this, okay? They did it with Sebastian Vettel. They did it with Fernando Alonso. You're talking about a 4-time world champion, okay, who had a chance at defeating Mercedes. They blew it, although to their defense, Sebastian did also do a few mistakes. Fernando Alonso, they blew it with the strategy. The only time they didn't blow it was 2007 when Kimi Räikkönen won the world championship. And the only reason he won it was because McLaren drivers Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton were fighting with each other so much that they let Kimi catch up.
Well, I also want to say hats off to Max Verstappen. He went from P10 to P1, and this was the best Lewis Hamilton race we've seen all year. So, I mean, I know you don't want to feel good for him because it's Lewis Hamilton, but you have to kind of feel good for him. He feels like he's coming back a little bit. He's getting his confidence. So,
well, what I kind of like about this Lewis Hamilton is you can see it in his eyes when he's talking about racing. He's got that spirit again. He's got that glow in his eyes because right now he is struggling to win races, and he's trying to win races. And they thought maybe they have a shot at winning this race with at least George Russell. But he's got that fire in his eyes because he's like, yeah, I'm enjoying racing. I'm enjoying fighting with everybody, because before he would be on the grid first, and then that was pretty much it. Nobody would challenge him. Now he's actually being challenged.
I think George Russell has helped him a lot more than people realize. Like, helped him by supporting him, and, he sees how good George can do, and he's like, dang, I need to be up there. So I feel like his confidence is back. He's back in the New York groove, or British groove, or whatever it is, but no, I mean, don't be surprised if you see a Lewis Hamilton and George Russell win in the next few weeks.
I was hoping for a George Russell win, I'm going to be honest. I was rooting for him.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see him do it because he's one of those guys in a few years we're going to be talking about he could be a world champion.
Exactly. But that's what's going on with Ferrari. That was the Hungarian and French Grand Prix review. And right now we're in a summer break, so there's not going to be any racing for the entire month of August, except the race is going to be on the 31st of August, and that's going to be the Belgium Grand Prix, which I'm a fan of, but they think they might getting rid of the Belgium Grand Prix, which, I hate that because I love Spa. But it's going to be very interesting. Haas got the new upgrades, and the car looks very similar to the Ferrari. Obviously, even Gunther said, obviously, we're partners with Ferrari. They're our engine suppliers, and we see what they're doing, and they're obviously doing so great. So, of course, we're going to copy their design.
Doing great. They're doing better than we are. So,
yeah, but these upgrades didn't really much help because they ended up being, I think, not even in the points, neither of them. Neither Mick nor Kevin Magnussen. And again, this is 2018 all over again. They were doing really good, and now they're just going back and back and back. And, yeah.
Well, don't give up hope on Mick yet.
I'm not giving hope on Mick. I'm giving up hope on Haas.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like Ferrari needs to learn the rule of the 6 Ps. Piss poor practice leads to piss poor performance. Or piss poor preparation leads to piss poor performance. That's right.
Definitely the preparation for this one.
Yeah. So, I mean, they have a few weeks off. I hope they can come back and...
Well, I think it's like 2 mandatory weeks where nobody in the factory can be there, and like everybody has to take a mandatory vacation.
Take a vacation, Leclerc.
He's taking a vacation.
Take a chill pill. Take some vitamins. We got them right here.
But anyway, like I said, that was the Hungarian Grand Prix, the French Grand Prix. That was the review of Formula One and all the news happening. Hopefully, some major news doesn't happen this weekend, the next few days before this episode releases. But yeah, that was it. You want to sign us off?
We want to let you know that you can reach out to us on social media. Follow us on Twitter at the Waterboy EXP or on Instagram at the Waterboy Pod. And until next time, listen to us, share us with your friends, your family, your dog, whatever. Find us wherever you find your favorite podcast, and we'll see you next week on the Waterboy Experience, barring any unfortunate circumstances.
Any sex toy mishap again.
And that won't happen again. But anyway, anything you want to say?
Sign us off, white boy.
Thank you for listening to this week's Waterboy Experience, and peace.
Second and goal just outside the 10. Hart tips it in, and it's Wall, he spins into the end zone for the touchdown. Watching greatness on one end in LeBron. There's a dude with 35 in white getting it done defensively and then offensively, taking over the